So the new Minister for DEFRA, I say new, been in the place now for some time, but it's the first time, Clare Barber, we've had a chance to sit down. I've been sort of trying to spread the love around this week, talk to different ministers. How are you settling in?
Yeah, good. I think it's so many different areas that DEFRA covers. We've got the land-based stuff, we've got the stuff in terms of our territorial waters. I think 86% of the biosphere is water, was one of the facts I came across, which I thought was just fascinating, actually. But yeah, lots to read back on to see how we got to where we are today. And then, to make the department plan, which will then come off the back of the island plan for Tynwald.
Are you going in a different direction from the last minister? I mean, any particular sea changes or?
I don't think there'd be anything, completely off track. But,
yeah.
For me, I think a big focus is around communication and talking to people, both, with the media, but also talking to colleagues within Tynwald. I think it's really important that message is there, making sure we're communicating with the wider public and seeing what people want, because actually we've got all these glens, we've got plantations that all sit within us.
You've got so many things.
We really have, and we've got the Footpaths Committee coming up, so there's opportunities there in terms of how can we increase accessibility to some of those brilliant natural resources that we have around the island, to make sure that we're not just accessible to families but also to people with disabilities, making sure that we've got information out there about what parking provision, toilets, and so people can make an informed decision about where they might go to, but actually ensure that people are really using the natural resources all around our island.
How's the man who's living off the grid? Where's he up to? Because you say I'd take this one over. Are you talking to him? Is things happening? Or is he still going to be ejected?
Yes, I'm actually going to go and meet with him tomorrow. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one, shall we?
Yeah.
Bird flu.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing, or potentially it was looking huge. I mean, where are we up to now?
So I think it had been a cause for concern. It's the first recorded outbreak we have on the Isle of Man of bird flu, of the high pathogenic H5N1 variant. We obviously had a report around geese initially, kept geese. So our vet and animal health team have been very much focused on making sure that we identify early, get the relevant samples sent off, and then act responsibly and appropriately. So at the minute we've got a surveillance zone around the kept geese that will be in place for 21 days post the final disinfectant and clean down to minimise any risk, which is what this is all about. It's a risk-based process. And then we've got the whole island set as a surveillance zone essentially within that. That means that there's restrictions in terms of asking people to keep their birds inside to avoid migratory birds, which is our highest risk really in terms of bringing bird flu in, coming in and mixing in with the kept birds and potentially spreading this further. So that's what's really important, asking people to put good biosecurity in place, make sure that they are keeping their birds in proper houses, cleaning down, feeding trays and so on regularly, and just really having an increased sense of awareness. Not if there is a bird that looks unwell or birds that have died, don't go handling them. Phone our team and we'll talk you through and make sure the right situations and procedures are followed.
What is the danger to the public? Is it just touching them, or is it the eating side of it? I mean, where was it everything? I mean,
no. So I mean, the risk to the public is very small, and I mean, obviously that's really public health advice, and we've worked with public health to put some advice out for the public in that regard. But they perceive the risk to be very small in that regard. But what's important, we don't want people touching birds and then not following those appropriate
and reporting things if they see things that
absolutely. So people can phone up. I don't have the number. Don't ask me that next. But people can phone.
Gov.im, you'll find something somewhere.
People can, if you search for avian flu Isle of Man government, it will come up with the right page, and people can either email or phone a line that they'll be able to give advice. Because the other thing is that not every bird that's found dead will be an avian flu case, but there's things that the vet and animal health team would be able to look for that would give an indication of whether that was likely to be a case that was of concern, which we would then seek to send samples. But it's all done on a risk-based approach.
Animal welfare, there's a bill in the offing. Where are we up to on this? And what's it saying, by the way, as well? What's it recommending or putting into law, shall we say?
Yeah, so at the minute we're just finalising some of that work within the department.
So it's still not a finished item?
It's not a completely finished bill.
No.
We just want to make sure that we're comfortable that all of the points that were picked up in the previous House have been addressed. Michelle Hayward's picking up and leading on that from within the department, which I think is brilliant. And Tanya August Hansen has come on board for DEFRA just specifically around that bill, because I recognise that's really important. It was important to me, but it's also important to a lot of people on the island. We need to get it right.
Did it fail just because they ran out of time? I can't remember now. Is that
no, it was voted down. And I mean, actually, I was one of the people who blocked it in the previous house, not because I didn't support animal welfare, because I think you'd struggle to find anyone who said, let's not bother putting animal welfare.
It just wasn't right.
I think it wasn't right, and there was questions that had been asked around whether we could use some of the EU legislation as an enabling piece of legislation, and those just weren't given the adequate responses. We hadn't had the consultation responses out early enough, so there were questions that I felt just hadn't been responded.
Give us an overview, protection-wise. What will be protected for the animals in the future?
So I've answered a question of Sarah Maltby actually already in House of Keys on this, but essentially we're looking at some of the protections around companion animals. We're looking at making sure support is there for example, police dogs and prison dogs, some of those things that have really come to the forefront in terms of Finn's law in the UK, but allowing us to bring those in through those pieces of UK legislation in through a hybrid bill that is partly enabling and partly setting down stuff that's specific for the Isle of Man.
Are we behind the curve or ahead of the curve when this comes in then? Are we just playing catch up, or are we
at
leading?
The minute we're playing catch up, but I'm hoping that we'll jump forward and be a little bit ahead once we've done it. But by making it enabling, when new stuff comes through, we would be able to bring that in through secondary regulations. So we're providing ourselves the opportunity to keep up pace. And I think that's so important with everything we do. We talked about sex offences, and I did interviews with you back then. With the sex offences legislation, back in the 80s we were ahead of the game, or 90s I think, 93. But obviously as time ticked on, we became behind the curve. And what we've tried to do with new law, which I think is so important, is bring a piece of legislation that things can be changed to make sure we can keep pace without going through what can sometimes be a very long process of bringing new primary legislation in. So I know people get frustrated and they're like, but emergency powers, you brought that in like that, and I understand the frustrations, but actually that's not the right way to make law in the long run. We need to look at how we can enable law to make it work better.
So something like puppy farming, which was a huge issue, like in Wales, wasn't it? And those sort of things, they had to change laws. Again, are we covered already, or is these the sort of things we have to find legislation for?
Yeah, so
we're not going to like to happen, but
there's so many things. I mean, we've had stuff about thefts of dogs, for example.
Oh yes.
I mean, that's been a real thing that people have reported, and it's making sure that we're comfortable both that those things are covered, but also that the penalties are sufficient, because often you'll find something's there and it's an offence, but the penalty people don't feel really matches the offence. So that's the piece of work that's happening, making sure that both the penalty, both it's actually a criminal activity, but that the penalty matches the level of the crime.
Finally, when will this likely to be in legislation, subject to not being put to one side or voted down by somebody else?
I think my only caveat would be that obviously the animal health team are huge players in this piece and are also at the minute very much focused on avian flu, but it will be in this parliamentary year, so I'm absolutely committed. I'm saying that. Don't they always say never commit to something, but no, look,
That's great. I love it. For a bit of fresh air here.
No, I really want it. It's going to be this year, but as I say, we may have a slight delay on. I think we'd said April in the island plan document. There is just a small possibility, because the same team are doing avian flu, and I've got there's a limited number of vets, and they work so hard within the department doing all of the statutory stuff that they do in terms of supporting farms, and honestly it's a massive wealth. I had no concept of just how much the vets do in DEFRA, but
that leads me back to our side. When you take over these departments, it must be such a learning curve, actually being inside of the whole organisation to see what's going on.
Absolutely, and I think I felt the same in Home Affairs and Health when I joined those 5 years ago. And DEFRA was something where I'd had a bit of an insight from the scrutiny committee side, but you start to see certain roles and how they come up again and again and again through lots of different things, and you're thinking, how do they prioritise that workload? And I think that's why it's so important actually that this commitment off the back of the island plan to bring in the departmental plans for a proper debate allows that priority setting to be done with a full debate in Tynwald, and to really understand where priorities sit, and to take that feedback really ultimately that comes from the people on the doorstep.